Hi, this is Hot Mike and I'm Nidhi Razdan. Today, China returns to controversial lockdowns as COVID cases surge. China is seeing the worst coronavirus resurgence in the country in the last 2 years, fueled largely by the Omicron variant that is ripping through the country. Today, nearly 30 million people are under lockdown across China in as many as 13 cities, which have been placed under a very strict lockdown. Most of the cases have been reported from the Jilin province, where 24 million people live. In fact, it is the first time since the original breakout happened back a couple of years ago when Wuhan and Hubei were locked down, which were entire provinces, that an entire province has been locked down by China all over again. Now, these measures actually did help China initially because it was able to contain the spread of COVID, the number of cases, and the number of deaths to a large extent. But now, the question is whether this will still pay off because the highly transmissible Omicron variant has changed the game entirely. It is wreaking havoc in a country that is obsessed with having a zero COVID strategy. For many Chinese citizens, this is an approach which is increasingly frustrating, especially as they're watching the rest of the world open up. China's zero COVID policy is essentially a heavy handed approach that has raised several questions about the human costs. For starters, it means a flood of restrictions like very strictly enforced lockdowns where you cannot step out of your house even to buy food or medicines. Jilin residents, for example, have been banned from moving around completely, and anyone who wants to leave the province has to take the police's permission first. The rules also entail mass testing, along with very tough quarantine measures for those people who do test positive, even if they are asymptomatic. Some examples of just how tough the rules in China actually are. There's the historic city of Xi'an, known for the terracotta warriors. It has a population of 13 million people, and back in December, they found just 150 COVID cases, but the entire city of 13 million people ended up being locked down. Another big city with nearly the same population size, Zhengzhou, tested each and every resident, that's nearly 13 million people, after only 11 cases tested positive. There is a ruthlessness in how Chinese authorities have decided to enforce these COVID lockdown rules simply because President Xi Jinping is obsessed with this zero COVID policy. In Xi'an, for example, once again, there was a hospital that famously refused to admit a man who was suffering from chest pains because he lived in what was then described as a medium risk district. As a result of that, the man died of a heart attack. There was another example of a woman who was 8 months pregnant and she was bleeding. She was told that her COVID test for the hospital was invalid and she ended up losing her baby. China's strict lockdowns have clearly had a huge human cost, but they're also hurting businesses as well, particularly today. The fresh lockdowns now have raised concerns about disruptions in global supply chains, and this is the reason why. Shenzhen is the southern tech hub of 17.5 million people. It began a strict lockdown a few days ago on Monday, with many factories and companies shutting down. Tech stocks have plummeted on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange as a result of this, as concerns over the impact of the virus have spread in Shenzhen. Shenzhen is home to tech hubs like Foxconn, which is one of Apple's oldest and largest suppliers. So you might not get that iPhone or iPad that you wanted right away in the near future, as well as other companies like Huawei and Tencent. So investors are clearly spooked by these strict lockdowns. And then you have car makers like Toyota and Volkswagen. Their factories and their output has been impacted as well because they've had to shut down. Many domestic flights have been cancelled as these restrictions have come into force. Tough travel rules have virtually halted tourism for the last couple of years. In fact, Chinese government authorities have also reportedly said that they're not going to be renewing expiring Chinese passports unless the holder has a good reason for wanting to travel abroad. Imagine that. Experts are also pointing out a major flaw in China's vaccination strategy. Dr. Eric Fingelding, who is one of the world's leading epidemiologists, has pointed out that half of China's 80-plus population is not fully vaccinated. And those who are vaccinated have mostly been vaccinated with Chinese vaccines like Sinovac or Sinopharm. Both are considered among the weaker vaccines in the market. And as Dr. Eric Fingelding points out, most of the deaths that have taken place in Hong Kong recently, actually more than half of them, have been in the 80-plus population. And that is why China is so desperate to control the spread of the virus this time.